had no idea that we were going to be required to close for the length of time that we did. So we understand that those dynamics can happen and that we will continue to be flexible and work through it. It's important, I think, also, as we think going forward, and these are areas that we're going to capture as we move forward in many ways, is making sure that we know where our kids left off at the end of the year educationally, making up for the learning losses that we might find, assessments so that we can really determine, aligned with state requirements and curriculum, that we can really determine where they are as we begin the school year. So those are all things that we've been working towards, but they're also priorities that we really want to focus on as we start school. In addition to something that I think we've been focusing on as well, and that's the importance of the social emotional, the health, the welfare, and social emotional support for students and staff. We all know in this district we face many difficulties, and I know many districts do, but not any that I know of around us have faced the combination of difficulties that we have. So it really does require attention to making sure that we're supporting families, students, and staff as we go into this new year. And then also, we know if we're going to be looking at virtual education, that we need to ensure that our technology is equitable for students and staff and adequate to serve the purposes of continuous, high quality, rigorous, good instruction. And so that's been a key point and focus point that we've been looking for. You've seen this. This is a list of committee members. It's also the dates. The committee started working in large group and then broke off into smaller groups, and still have added since then staff members to kind of help as we funnel down details into what it looks like when students go back to school, what it looks like at home, and what it looks like in school. So you're gonna get a lot of information tonight, but we're also hoping to get some feedback from you in some specific areas. And you'll notice as we go along, you'll see some highlighted areas, and the individuals presenting are basically the chairs of each group. But they're going to, you will see some of the things highlighted that we specifically are going to need some board feedback on. Not approval, there's no action item really for approval, but as we go forward to create our final plan, we would want to have your approval for certain things, and as we go through, you'll see. So with that, we're going to start with the subgroup communication. Ms. Hansard, who's up on the big screen with us, will let you get started. And am I flipping slides for you, or are you doing it?
I think you might have to flip them. So I'm going to start with this first one, and then I'll ask you, well, I need to go back to that first one, but then I'll ask you to change. Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just report from our communications subcommittee, and I wanted to let all of you know that our messaging, we have determined, must be strategic and factual. We cannot release information too early without having all the facts, so that we do not contribute to unnecessary confusion. So we will be working closely with these subcommittees to communicate a comprehensive plan. So on the next slide, these are the subcommittees that form the whole committee. And as there will always be questions, we know that there's going to always be questions, and research tells us that generally those individuals that are under stress, and we all know that this pandemic has been very stressful for many of us, have difficulty comprehending information, and that trust is built through empathy and honesty. So that is what we were going to base, that's what we are going to base our plan on. Therefore, we'll be surveying on the next slide, we will be surveying our staff and for their teaching preferences, and as well as their health considerations. And in this particular area, as far as budget impact, the impact that we might see is that if we have a large number of staff members, and that's not just teachers and administrators and people that are on campuses, but and all of these employees are on campuses, but that could also include our drivers, our bus drivers, our nutrition services employees, all of these operations. These these departments have substitutes that come in as well. So that could impact our budget there. As far as prior to today, we released a back to school banner with information regarding the restart and reentry committee and its dedicated work throughout these past few weeks. We are also in the process of completing COVID-19 response protocols that will include a 5-level approach. The first one is prevention, mitigation, modified operations, then facility closure if that becomes necessary, and then district closure. So these protocols are also going to involve training for all staff. Then on the next slide, our comprehensive communication plan. Any careful crafted reopening plan will only be as successful as our ability to maintain trust with our stakeholders and credibility through frequent and transparent two-way communication. Tomorrow, the PR department is going to release an interactive FAQ page on the website. It will be on the front page, and there will be a button that the person can go to and click on to ask any question. And then one of us will be able to, in the PR department, provide that answer. If we have to reach out to other departments or other campuses, we will do so in order to provide factual information. But that will be a place where people can go to ask questions as we move through this process. And then our job in the communication and in the PR department, basically, and this subcommittee is just beginning. We will work diligently with these subcommittees to communicate a comprehensive plan to our staff, our students, our parents, and the community for the return to the 2020-2021 school year. We currently have a framework for a back to school guide, which we have titled 2020 Connecting the Future. So we will continue work on that. And the PR department will use our various media social platforms and that we currently have in place. So we do not see any impact to the budget as far as the communication plan goes. And then lastly, I would just like to thank my subcommittee for all their input, their feedback, and productive conversations that we've had throughout this entire process. So thank you.
Okay. I'm going to be talking to you guys about calendar and learning, and this of course is also encouraged for you guys to interact. So if you have any kind of questions for it, because our subcommittee gathered a lot of information, and I'm going to go over some of this information with you. However, understand that all of our information that we collected has allowed us to be able to put proposals together for y'all to consider. But after that, there's a lot more work to be done. So all of us are going to be continuing with plans after this. So I wanted to show you guys, as you can see in the first slide, we actually launched a survey. And for those of you who are parents, you should have received it as well. And that was the data was collected between June 1st and June 3rd. The total amount of Santa Fe ISD parents, students that responded was 1,635 households. So remember, that information came from households with people with multiple children. So that's actually a very, very high participation rate for us to be able to get feedback. And then of course, we went ahead with campus employee, not entire campus district information. We went with campus employee information because that came down to the teaching and learning aspect, and we wanted to be able to know, those folks in terms of how they feel with safety and returning, and as to whether or not they're going to want certain provisional safeguards in place. So 246 campus employees answered that as well. Of course, this is the initial survey, and then there are going to be opportunities where we're going to present and create more surveys as well. And we'll talk to y'all about that in a little while. So when you're looking at the surveys in your packet, and then of course up here on the board, if you will see, one of the things that I wanted you guys to be able to notice and note, when we initially sent this out, again, in June, early June, the green, which is the larger part of the pie chart, represents return and fall. And it's kind of small for those of you who have 2-page or 2 slides per page. But then obviously the light green or the lime green was, if allowed, continue with digital. The 4% was withdraw face-to-face, and then the 14% that was undecided. So, where that's concerned, we don't know where they are now, and we don't even know if the 78% is still there. But at this point, this is the data that we collected for our subcommittee in order to be able to start moving forward. The thing is that I find unique is that we paralleled the information side by side in order to see where we, completely polarized on an issue in terms of safety and concern and education with our instructional staff and our parents, or was there an alignment? And to our surprise, we came up with an alignment. So you had the majority of people who are saying, at this point in juncture, that they would like to return. As you can see, the parent and student responses on the calendar selections, the green, the Kelly green, the Santa Fe Indian green is not supportive, but yet the lime green is very to extremely supportive. And then on the parent and student responses for the calendar selections, you can see, again, remember the Kelly green is you're not supportive, and then the light or the lime green is you're very to extremely supportive. So you can see the results there. And at the bottom is the indicator. And the indicator is like the original 2020 with extended school breaks at holidays. That was favored by your parent and student. And then the original 2021 school calendar was overwhelmingly supported as well at 67% by your parent, household, and students. For campus employee responses as well, if you look and you compare the data, and I know that you can do that later with looking at these slides, but as you compare to the data, you will see, again, the Kelly green standing for not supportive, the lime green for very to extremely supportive. And then again, you'll see a parallel in terms of decisions when it comes to the selection of their calendar choices. So with the information that we had, that was one of the charges with my subcommittee, is for us to be able to try to prepare an environment for Santa Fe ISD. While obviously we know we're looking over our shoulder and we're listening for TEA guidance, but and we're seeing what other districts are doing. However, we're also trying to make the best informed decisions in a timely manner so that we're not sending things out and then having to retract it based on, new information. So that was kind of like what our charge was with that. Some of the other things that we actually looked at were safety measures. The green was not necessary to the light green being should be, required. And as you can see, whenever we asked about employee mask, student mask, at sporting and spectator events, asked the campus the same thing. And again, you can see those two slides are pretty parallel in terms of the outcome and the results. And then when we came to safety measures for parent-student results, that you can see the not necessary, again, is the dark green, and then the olive green is the should be required. And there are the results with the parents and the students, social distancing in hallways, cafeterias. And then here are the employee responses as well for social distancing in hallways and cafeterias. And as we continue with safety measures, here are parent and student results for modifications in recess outdoors. Again, remember the Kelly green, that is representing not necessary, to where the olive green is should be required. So for recess outdoors, that's the first piece of information on the data chart, and then sports, PE, dance, and band. When we go to campus employee measures, again, you can see very similar to our community results. When we go to safety measures for transportation, the parent and student results for that, as you can see, again, the not necessary, because we inverted the graph here, the not necessary is the Kelly green, and the olive green would be the should be required. So that's our parent students for transportation. And then we, of course, have our campus employees and their thoughts on transportation, adjustment and bus seating, arrival dismissal times, which was the indicator that was being measured there. So that's the overview of the results. And we wanted to let you know that that was the initial beginnings of when we started the subcommittee, well, the committee work in general, but the subcommittee that we created was for us to be able to make certain that we listen to our community, but we also listen to our instructors that have been living in the trenches. And so a lot of feedback, a lot of information, and there was a lot more informational data that came with this as well. However, it helped us with guidance, obviously, from TEA provisions, CDC guidelines, our state and health, authorities. We were able to at least start putting together what we believe to be a reasonable proposal to try to hopefully be preventative in our moving forward with education, so that our charge from, obviously the commissioner of the state is we are going to be held accountable. The accountability system is definitely implemented. As far as some, I think, modifications that they've made to that, they're currently moving it toward, it's later, correct, Sarah? They're moving it later if we take it all online, correct? And we have a, right. So we have a lengthier window for that. And then we know that more is to come. But knowing that, we know that our learning environment has to be set up so that we are providing our kids the most successful access to education at all points. So there's some things that are exciting, what we went ahead and we started to do, I think, in the spring. And then there's some things that we obviously know that we're going to have to continue to work on as well. And that's just part of the unknown, which is, part of it.
So Kim, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In some of the early stuff that the commissioner put out, it was obvious to me that exemptions are not going to be just granted somewhat like they have been in the past. So I'm assuming that all of y'all's work calendar wise was taking that we're going to be accountable for those minutes when if we have a closure, if we have something like that, it's going to have to be made up.
Correct. And that was part of, and that's really part of our package of proposal to kind of put in front of you, because we had to take all of that information from TEA, which you all know was a moving target, but there were pieces of it or traces of it that remained the same. But anyway, absolutely. We had to be able to think about how are we going to absorb any of this time if we have to have missed time. We had to think of every scenario in all of these proposals, and the scenarios are, what if an entire campus actually has to be quarantined, and that includes the educators? Well, are we going to be able to get substitutes that are going to come in and resume that? So we have to have backup plans, but we also had to build in time to where, let's say we actually do have to shut down for 2 or 3 days. And that really means, okay, there's a concession. There's no education being pushed out for these next 2 or 3 days until we can put the next plan that we have in place and the next proposal plans that we have in place for you all to act upon, so that we can absorb that time, and it pushes some things around. So that definitely was taken all into account so that we could make the best of it, and hopefully not be able to put pressure on households as well to feel like, okay, what are we preparing for today? So we wanted to give us as much active and preventative measures in place. So our subcommittee, we have some recommendations, and then I have artifacts that are in the folders. And for all of you viewers at home, I'm going to be able to show a few of these up here. However, we will have these artifacts published as well on the website pending board approval. Mm-hmm.
Y'all were worried about if you lose your staff, you wouldn't have enough substitutes. But if you have that teacher that's in there and all the students, you're not going to have any students that need a substitute, because they're going to have to quarantine for 14 days as well. Right. But we're being charged with education. So even those students that go into quarantine, and let's say the adults, as the news says, and that's what I'm saying, like we prepared for moderate,
case proposals and then worst possible case proposals. So if you had, like, let's just say the demographic in which they're saying that it hits the hardest, if you had the majority of the adults who had it severely and they couldn't teach, but you had the kids that were quarantined, they still could have education, then we would have to really be able to say, what do we have in place and what could we have with assurances to propose to you guys, or that you guys feel like, okay, with assurances, no matter what, y'all have something in reserve to be able to think, of a worst case scenario like that. So those are the things that we thought about in order for us to be able to kind of create these proposed calendars to you all. So the first proposal for you all to look at, and we will also want to, let you know that we reached out to other districts as well, with some of their same considerations. And, we also looked at the data to see what our entire community wanted. So our first proposal is to look at the recommendation of an adherence to our original 2021 school calendar, and that's here. However, with extending the school day of 10 minutes. Now, the reason for 10 minutes is, and I want to give a shout out to, I just have to say this right now, to our PEMS and Skyward folks, Kelly and Marcia, who worked with us in a think tank in order to make certain that we have these numbers in a spreadsheet correctly. We added 10 minutes. And when we added 10 minutes across the board on a schedule for proposed schedule, yes, we have later release times. It's not reflected on this copy yet because it would be something in which the copy that would be publishable, I'm not going to change the times because we still have this option. This is the original one you guys voted on that was originally proposed by DEIC. So if you go into this and you look at it, the 10 minutes, what it happened, here's your budget sheet, so to speak. Your budget sheet, that's what I refer to it as, because you have days that are in the bank. You have days that are reserved and backed up in the bank. So when you look at the budget sheet, you can see what we did by 10 minutes, just by adding 10 minutes onto your school day to the end of the school day so that it didn't, interfere with our transportation schedule. You'll see that we basically have an additional 10 days. Now, by state law, we have to always have and factor in an additional 2 days that we have for reserve, like a bad weather makeup day or whatever. However, what we did by adding 10 minutes is we created equity across the board so that we had 10 days. So in worst case scenario where everybody was sick and they were so ill that we have to actually be able to, say, okay, I had time out. Then you have 10 days within that calendar to be able to absorb before we even have to begin to look at any type of, low attendance waivers or anything like that. So we felt like in terms of any type, this is also 10 days in the bank that gives you at least, if you were to say in perfect case scenario, let's pretend, and I know that we don't live there. So if we were to say, okay, Friday, we get an announcement and we want to close the school, that we close the school, and let's say that we do have to close the school per se for 2 weeks, and a hurricane comes in on top of it and we're unable to, access all of our online learning. You have basically in there a total of 16 days in order for us to have that spread and that breadth, to have the time in which we don't have to make up, we don't have to put in waivers. We actually have these days built in our calendar. And that is, those are days that are not inclusive of our holidays or anything like that. So that's a proposal that we have in order for you to have basically, like you would say, a reserve or money in the bank for that. So then the second suggestion or, recommendation that we want you guys to consider, or if you do want to consider, it's up to you whatsoever, is to go ahead and see whether or not you wanted to have a reserve calendar. So let's say things change drastically and, they actually say, okay, school is not going to come back as we want it to. And we're going to have to be able to survive in this landscape, and we don't want to lose instruction at all. That's our most valuable asset. And so in order to do that, the state of Texas, or TEA, actually provided us with guidance for us to look at a variety of different calendars. And as y'all know, and some of our previous board meetings, the innovative side is here, but also on the safe side is here as well, to give you a reserve calendar. If in the event, let's say we use these 10 days and it looks like the patterns are going to start, completely being perpetuated by, the pandemic until we come up with, a good vaccine, then if you wanted to, I guess you could either vote it in at this point, or you could wait till later, and then we could, have a workshop or a board meeting in which you guys could reconsider this backup calendar, which was most suited to the data that we collected as well. But also it kept in mind a lot of the student-centered focus. So this is what we would like to call COVID-19A. So if you look at this calendar was, like I said, it was a framework that they have shared with us as a resource on TEA. And what we did, and what our team did, is we took it and we emulated it so that we could take a lot of the information and feedback that we received from our community and our teachers, and we put it in this calendar so that it wouldn't be drastically, because as you saw in the data, they didn't want drastic change from the original calendar. So this is as close as we possibly could if we had to implement a reserve calendar. And if you look at all of the blue portions there, that is your intersessional time. Now, some of the intersessional time has already the predetermined holidays built in, but the excess intersessional time was suggested and created for a multitude of things. It was to allow for the separation of mass population. It was it was allowed to separation for mass population, give breaks to allow that. It was any missed time to be able to make that up, and I'll give you a little information on that here in a moment. And then it was to absorb any closure as well. So there's a variety of components to this, to where if we had to go into a reserve calendar, then let's say we ended up having to start school later due to the fact that, COVID has us, yet again saying, okay, we're going to make an adjustment. The time that you have in November, or the weeks that you have in December, if you missed a week, let's say in September, and instruction, was halted for whatever reason, then you could take any of those additional intersessional weeks, and you could actually say to the students, we're having school during this week. Wouldn't be during their holidays, but it would be during this week. So we're going to conduct school during this week. Also, the intersessional calendar for backup as well during intersessional time. Let's say that we really do have a good plan, and I assure you we will. However, life happens sometimes, and sometimes, plans don't always run as smoothly as we would like them to. However, if everything's doing well and we do have the intersessional calendar, and we only have to maybe absorb 1 week within that time, the other weeks that are intersessional times doesn't necessarily mean that every student's on break. And the reason for that is because there's the additional school year funds that come into effect for students that can come to school, and they're targeted students to be able to get support. It's like intervention and additional support that's added for those students. And we actually end up getting half ADA for those students as well. So the intersessional calendar is just something in which we wanted to be proactively prepared to be able to give you guys some things to consider, ask questions about, but also to be prepared with a plan for that. So do we have any questions at this point?
This is what was driving my original question, to make sure. Had a lot of conversation with folks that have become used to, bad weather and things like that. And we seem to get these exemptions, that a lot of that is going to go away because of COVID. And that when they see some potential calendar like this, that they shouldn't necessarily go make vacation plans for March the 8th through the 19th just yet.
Mhm.
You know, that they have to understand that there could be interruptions to that, and that that targeted group you're talking about is going to be, if we don't have any.
Correct. So,
Disruption.
so if we did have it, you're right, that then whatever calendar we end up sending out, there'll be a lot of messaging, but also a lot of educating our staff, our community, our students, and, ourselves in order to make certain that we're equipped and prepared for people to really have that understanding. The thing is in which, when I talk to you guys about the learning environment, I think what's interesting from all of this, and I know that's something in which, I think it was the last board workshop we talked about, was the fact to know that we can be a little bit creative here, but also reach out to those students who are our, continual, frequent absent students. And we can actually be able to potentially address those concerns while they're at home and still receive funding. So there are a lot of different variables at play in this equation. However, there's enough constants now that I can tell you that are decisively put out by TEA that's allowed us to be able to go, okay, so this would be a really good game plan, so that when our whole department's planning, we're able to make certain that we're coming up with the best, the most optimal plan that's going to get our kids the education that they need without them losing, a lot of information. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Are there any other questions?
Before you move on, would you go back to the slide where we highlighted the two questions?
Yeah.
So just for a moment, if there's any questions or I guess worries, concerns, likes, dislikes about adding the 10 minutes to bank the days and or having the reserve calendar. TA has identified that you don't have to adopt the reserve calendar now, but you may, or you can wait until you need it. So it could happen in October if you needed to do that. So I guess just your thoughts on the additional 10 minutes or not the additional 10 minutes. We talked at our last meeting, I believe in May, about our calendar started early anyway. Most school districts started a little bit later than us. So to be able to start earlier than this is probably not a possibility, but we could adjust the calendar going forward if we needed to. So just, I guess, any thoughts about the 10 minutes, adding some time for instruction or for makeup or for needed?
So just for clarity, adding the 10 minutes is in there to assume that we're going to have problems where we need to push the calendar out or miss certain days. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Are you talking about, okay, so so adding the 10 minutes with that, it gives us some cushion in terms of being able to predict. So, let's just say that, internet goes down or our server goes out and we cannot deliver instruction. So let's say you had 2-day turnaround before we were able to get anything back up. You have 2 days that you could actually say, okay, we can use these 2 days and we're good. Now we have 8 additional days in which we're going to make certain stay in that bank because we should be able. So what we kind of did, Clay, was we looked at, like worst case scenarios, and then we tried to predict in the environment that we just already lived in, like how long it would actually take for turnaround. How long will we be down without students potentially not having that education if we had to remove them and we had to change, our environment entirely? Like what would be the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario would be 2 days. But then, and I'm talking about in terms of if everything's functioning well, if we needed to get things in place. However, really and truly, we should be able, and part of our professional learning plan, we should be able to, we should be able to actually function really and truly after about a day. But putting that 10 additional minutes on allowed all of us to feel like, okay, it gave us that 10 days just in case, let's be honest, there's a hurricane or there's an ice storm so that you have those things that happen here, oddly, on the Gulf Coast, that we have time built in that you're not going to have to worry about that affecting any of our funding whatsoever.
So if we don't have those days of hurricanes or ice days or whatever, how do you squeeze that in the schedule? Do they leave early? Are they going to have extra days here or there? What are you going to do with those 10 days?
So if we don't have those days,
You add them to the end of the calendar. You add them.
yeah,
So right now, this calendar ends before Memorial Day, right? May.
yes,
The date
or
is-
at
So
Memorial Day.
if we
No.
do not have enough minutes and it's at the end of our calendar year, then we must add minutes. So we would go to June. We would just extend it to June. So
I'm
that's
asking,
another
what if you
option.
don't use those 10 days where you've prepared for them and you don't need them? What do you do with that? Do you go back and,
You just are happy that you got more instructional time for students.
so basically the teachers are going to be working and employees are going to be there for 10 days for free?
Extra minutes, not days, extra minutes. not
Minutes.
days, Yeah.
So we're using 10 days as of minutes.
So it's not it's not days. It's really total minutes. is
Yeah,
what we're
it's total
required to
minutes.
do.
Like they still have the required total minutes and then their contract days don't exceed 187.
Okay.
So
I was
they're
just-
still have the same number of hours.
Well, we were referencing days at one point and now we're going back to minutes. So
She's
I
just
just,
kind of giving you
Well, the days though, it
I
gives
got
you,
it.
yeah.
it's 10 extra days.
equivalent to 10 extra days.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is a hybrid of our normal schedule.
So
This
this
is-
would be the addition
is-
to, the suggestion for the addition
And
to.
this is Plan B.
And then this is Plan B, just for you guys to look at and consider. We wanted to go ahead, since we had the information and we were doing the research, to provide you with stuff so that you actually aren't going to have to make a decision. And then we have to go back to the drawing board to look at it. So we had the data, and with the data, we wanted to create for you all something that, again, would work for the community and the students who voted for this being a second type choice if we had to, so that it's not extending them too long.
And this will be regular start time. This won't have the extra 10 minutes.
No, this won't have the extra 10 minutes. This actually, if you look on your, like I said, what you call like your bank or your budget sheet, you could see the start and release time, and that would be the typical start and release time.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Currently, this thing on, this thing going or not? A day is 420 minutes, right?
Mhm.
And currently, everyone except the high school is going 1,400 minutes longer, correct?
I don't know about the
Due-
exact
Due
totals.
to late start days?
I'd have to look on this. So-
There's 15 late start days.
Right.
2 hours? That's 3.3 days, 1,400 minutes. Are the other campuses going 1,400 minutes less? Because I think they're going 1,400 minutes more already than the high school is.
So you do. You have a variety of different minutes in here. And so what the committee, including all of the principals, decided is they decided to take on those additional minutes. The minutes were different anyway for a variety of reasons, because we can go, we can go as long as we would need to, but it's not like we're trying to bring everybody here overnight. However, you're right. So like when you look at the high school, is that the high school's the top one? They have a total of minutes over 4,120.
Where's that at?
It's on the budget sheet, or the second sheet to the master calendar. Yeah, so if you see in the column that says minutes over, they have an additional 4,120 minutes over. And then as you have for the junior high, they have a 4,015 minutes over. And then elementary is 4,015 minutes over as well. So they were part of our extended subcommittee, and given all the information that we've had, that's why the campuses decided to add an additional 10 minutes onto the day, so that everybody would have the reserve of near 10 days in the bank, so that you could have 10 school days accounted for.
It is not something that we have
So-
to do, however. That is something that you can elect not to do.
Right.
Understanding that if we have to make up time, we have to make up time. So it has to come from somewhere. So, if you get to the end date, and on this intersessional type calendar, the end date's much later already for that reason. But if if we want to stick with the original schedule without adding minutes, then need to understand that if we have to stop for whatever reason and we can't continue virtual learning, then we will have to make up that time in June.
Mhm.
Basically. So school will be extended to June, which is fine. I mean, you can take your chances on that, and that's another option that you have. So that's why it's in green, because that's where we need for you to kind of say, yes, we would want to add the 10 minutes, or no, we would not.
So as we calculate the 10 extra minutes, is that based on the secondary level? Is that based on the primary level?
Every day, end of every,
But what I'm meaning, if we have the late starts built in there, isn't that extra minutes we can just use toward our bank? And
You could.
Not include the
Mhm.
late starts? I mean, I don't want to take them away from the
Right.
teachers and the staff and everything in
Right.
high school.
but that's
So-
just the
That's
high
kind of
school.
my point. You have 3.3 days basically there,
Right.
1,400 minutes there, just
Right.
in late start days. That only the high school is losing out on.
Correct. You know,
So yes, that can happen, but that doesn't affect the other schools, which would have to adjust as well.
What are those days used for that on the late start days? What is,
What are they used for? Professional learning. So when we present to you all the data, where the elementary and junior high has it built in, the high school really did not. So we didn't have the common core times with the tested subjects, the EOC. We didn't have time for those teachers to be able to get together in professional learning communities. We were really hopeful to be able to have taken the test this year. Unfortunately, we were not, but we do have some data that we wanted to show you in terms of all of the information that we've gotten back, and we actually put in the formula to give us what our predictions would have been, which would have been, very, very, very good in terms of targeting our goals. And that's a reflection of it. During that time is used, very, very wisely. And that's why, my team and I were out and we're helping, and we're, implementing and have a variety of different systems to support that. But when you look at the data, because that's one of the things that we always knew, and when that was originally, I think, suggested, was late start suggested with Rachel, or was it prior?
We've been doing it for 10
Okay,
years. We've been
yeah.
doing it for a long
So
time.
anyway, when that was originally suggested, that was what it was suggested for. It was to help our accountability. I can tell you in terms of, since, we've been working on we're going into our third year of implementation of our model, and it's definitely yielding higher results from that. So it's one of those things that, it is tough sometimes to look at, but high school schedules, you pull from one and then you're pulling from the other. So it's really hard once you get to the high school, because there's so many people that are either coaches or involved in extracurriculars. And I mean, and Jenny knows, she helped build the master schedule, and so did Beth. She's one of the high school counselors as well. But anyway, it is valuable time. And once we are able to show you updates in terms of our data, I think that you'll agree. However, that is something that is also considered as well, to where, and that was something in which, Ms. Harris was very much in agreement that if I have to remove some late start times, then, I will. However, I really don't see me being able to make, the campus as successful as I'd like, because our goals are set very high. You want to know about the accountability this year? I mean, I know that y'all know that, but they're set even higher for this year, even though we've missed considerable amount of face-to-face time with teachers. It's utilized very well. So, we will make work whatever makes sense. But we also, and I want you guys to understand, we also aren't wasting time where that's.
So was there much discussion or thought given to that there's some unknowns
Mhm.
when they come back to school about what losses or gains digital learning and the whole COVID-19 might have cost us, to just building in those extra minutes for additional instruction time to try to catch people up if needed? I mean, I don't know that y'all did that, but that's what I'm asking.
Yes, actually, and that's a concern with everybody. And so that's a very fair question. I'm going to tell you, wasn't a perfect scenario, but I'm glad for our entire staff. And I want to thank everybody in Santa Fe ISD. I mean, yes, my team initially had to get it all started and we oiled the machine, but the teachers made the decision to do the right thing, and the right thing was to follow our curriculum and use their actual initial instruction teaching methods to teach kids versus some of your surrounding districts that chose to go to, really kind of boxed, um, curriculum that was in the form of a digital worksheet in a sense. And because of that, we actually, number one, we went, my whole entire team, we went into a training that helps us to be able to start mitigating that and, doing some predictors. But number two, we went ahead at the end of the year and we did an assessment. And the assessment that we did was made and aligned to all of the major concepts that they should have been taught through that last 9 weeks. And it's basically, it was kind of like a performance assessment where they had to collect artifacts and data. And our kids, it looks like based on that instruction, actually did well. They did retain some of that information. And I do believe it was because of the tough choice that the teachers made. And that y'all have heard a lot of their, you've heard a lot of their testimony in the sense of how many hours that they had to spend, countless, to do it, but they did it. And they're yet again ready to do it again because we've, again, we have to continue. And we've been continuing since probably in May, we started professional learning again in order to start perfecting our practice and realigning our curriculum so that teachers are ready to be able to punt the ball. Should it be online? Should it be in person? Should it be a little bit of both? So yeah, I mean, we're all going to have that. And we have those concerns, but also the summer, a lot of the, like the instructional continuity funds that we received from the state, we utilized that. We had a huge team. We took data and we took research and we made certain that we made as much information, as much learning that we possibly could to the students, available for the students, so that our students are interacting with those as well. So, and then we have a summer jump start that will happen July 20th, the week of July 20th, which will concentrate on some of the students that could be, the summer slide students that could actually be in alignment with their peers if they didn't have the buffer of summer that often takes them away from reading and writing and math. So we also have plans at the beginning of the school year, whether it be virtual or whether it be, face-to-face, for students to have assessments. We have mini assessments, and those mini assessments will actually inform the instruction and help the teachers within like the first 3 weeks to say, okay, this is a skill I need to work on with this kid. So let me work on this with this kid. And then, and be able to close that gap quickly and move on. So we have systems in place for that. Right.
Has to do with funding. So when we would build in our calendar the makeup days, what we found is that the kids wouldn't come those days and the families had already had other plans, and our ADA was so low, it would drag down our funding. So when we add days as makeup, we find that as a disadvantage if they weren't already on the calendar with the funding. So a lot of that was some of the thought that we want to make sure that we stabilize that funding, that we meet those minute times. And I believe when we made that transition, they recommended that you build in a slight cushion in order to cover your bad weather days. So that was
You
all
have to
part
have
of it.
two days, basically, like they said, in the bank for that. That's required.
So one comment I just, and maybe it's already done, I keep on having this flood of emotion, in college days, and I'm thinking more of the secondary, the high school level about getting total credits.
Mhm.
To me, should the fall semester or even spring semester have a COVID outbreak and we have to shut down for 2 weeks, whatever that case may be, we end up having to extend our academic calendar, getting a full credit from August to maybe even almost close to July. This seems an unreasonable amount of time. Did the committee take into considerations, and if so, what was the thoughts behind it, going to like the old school block schedule? where in case we don't have an outbreak in the fall, but yet we can finish 4 or 5 credits for the high school kids by mid-semester, in December. We still have longer days and things of that nature, but then also we at least get those kids the credits. Is there any consideration to that? Is there any value to that? Trying to finish it up.
So no, that's a good question, but we really do have things like the so if we get to a position to where you're talking about last minute, yeah, we're looking at a variety of different scheduling, but we also have resources like the Texas Virtual School Network, things like that, that if we get to the point to where a kid is shy of credit or needing multiple credits, they're going to be able to have access to those types of courses if they want to self-pace those. So we can still do, a variety of different, like remote learning. We also, I know that you guys used to offer certain courses in the summer. So we're looking at those kinds of options as well for students that might want to accelerate some time, but also those students that if they get behind, they have that, as well.
And then the one last comment, I keep on going back to the way that universities and colleges structure their classes, especially the online courses. You can have 50 kids in an online course, or you can even have up to 200, 300 kids in an online course.
Right.
And when it comes to staffing, all you need is your instructor and maybe a form of what I'm going to call a grad assistant or some sort that's helping that teacher. And then that has less impact on our staffing should we have to have PTO and everybody else out. So, and I don't want, I know that I don't want to keep this held up, but those are the types of things that are going through my mind as we work through this.
Right.
I think actually great comments, and I know there were discussions in many, many different scenarios, but I think the next part where you talk about the different options that we'll be looking at, we'll talk to that a little bit. So Kim, I think
Yes.
unless there's other calendar discussions, we'll have to come back to that, I'm sure. We'll keep going with the next slides about what type of learning we're talking about.
Okay, so
One quick question I forgot to ask.
that's right.
So, or do we have a calendar if we don't go back to school?
Do we have a calendar if we do not go back to school?
Yes.
It
We will start on August 3rd.
Yeah.
August 13th.
And then it'll be normal times like we ended the school year with.
Yeah. If you guys decide that we're not going to do anything at this moment, we have our original calendar that y'all adopted
Gotcha.
in January. Right. Right. Okay. So the learning and calendar subcommittee as well, we have to look at the variety of what's defined as the learning environment. So you have a variety of different types of learning environment. You have face-to-face, virtual, synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, and then attendance that goes with that in each area. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So we're going to talk about the face-to-face. And if you look at the face-to-face, it is in person and it's in class. It's traditional methods of attendance with a 90% rule. So you're looking at what we would say would typically be in place. Typically be in place, but of course we know that safety protocols are going to be needed as well. So anyway, and then we also know that this is going to be pending, TEA provisions. So TEA provisions might have us make the environment look different. And I'll get to that in a moment as well. So then you have your virtual environment, and then you have your remote synchronous instruction, your remote asynchronous instruction, and then you have your hybrid as determined, by the district. So what you would define, what we did in the spring semester would be asynchronous. So I'm going to explain that to you all. However, asynchronous in terms of what it's defined by TEA's definition now of all of the guidelines that we have to implement, we will have to put those in place. So our environment's going to look a little bit different. However, again, I would love to applaud our staff who decided to implement our traditional curriculum because we're not struggling through and creating a whole different curriculum. We adhered to our curriculum. We adhered to professional learning communities during this time. And therefore, our students, I really do believe in Santa Fe ISD, had a lot more authentic instruction than some of the other districts, surrounding districts that, chose to send it out via different software. So when you look at the virtual environment for remote synchronous, remember this is in time. So we are looking at, and we're looking at a variety of options of what that will look like for, potentially having to offer a virtual experience for kids at home. So Eric, that question that you had in terms of can like 50 kids log in if 50 kids stay home that day? Absolutely. We'll have a teacher that will be able to provide instruction for those students so that we can account for those students. So, but the definition from TEA in order for us to receive funding is, hand in hand with, it is two-way, it's real time, it's live, it's virtual instruction between teachers and students when they're not on campus. It has to be provided through a computer, electronic device, or over the phone. Instruction must address required curriculum. For attendance, you can see there the funding is generated when attendance is recorded daily at a locally selected snapshot time. Teachers will post attendance as if students were physically present. So a student has to be in live time. A teacher has to be able to see that student, and that student has to say, I'm here. And then as you can see here, also, I wanted to tell you guys, this is also based on research for what we can do, like how students can actually learn the best in what environments they can learn in. So the synchronous is something that is highly suggested for our students because we're actually going to get the most authentic learning experience for our kids if it's in real time. So pre-K through second, because of age, there is a recommendation, nor do you receive funding if you're synchronous. So for attendance, so remote asynchronous is what they recommend for that. But third through 12th is instructional minutes they give us, and then we'll have that snapshot time if we implement synchronous instruction. And again, that's what all of our teams and committees on campuses are going to be working on. So then you have remote asynchronous instruction, in which the student and teacher is very similar to what we did, but now when TEA is tightening up to make certain that we are providing the best of instruction, there's different ways we're going to monitor student work with this. And teachers do have to engage daily with their students. It just may not be face-to-face. It may be through a product. It may be through, if any of you we're used to the Flipgrid, if you saw any of those in the homes, things like that. Also, we have a learning management system. That's our Canvas system. And that system actually, it records, every, log in, log out, time spent with the instructors as well. So all of that is record of whether or not we have actually implemented the asynchronous definition. So there's just a variety of opportunity for us to look at that. Any of these plans that we end up deciding on how we're going to have it within the environment, what we're going to provide, any of these plans, by the way, have to be approved by TEA prior to us implementing. So we have a lot of work to do in the next week for us to be able to get prepared to create scenarios so that we're making certain that our students are going to have the accountability and we're going to receive funding. Now, the great thing about this is, remember, now that this has happened, any of our students who are sick, those sick days that I got to go home, I need to go to the nurse, hey, they can go home and we can simply, and we will have our environment set up so that we can simply be able to do, okay, log on at 4:00, in order for them to be able to do that, log on at 3:00 for this class. So we can actually, students that are sick, homebound instruction, we're looking at that as well. But there's a variety of different ways that we never had before that we can actually take attendance and receive funds for these students. So thing is, on the teacher end, I want y'all to keep in mind that it's going to be a lot of contact and a lot of information. So we have a lot of systems to set up in the meantime to make certain that we're being able to keep track of where they are, who they're with, and also be able to let them be able to do it in the home to where there's minimal learning on the parent part, and we are in the driver's seat for the students being able to receive that learning. Thank you. All right. So that was the asynchronous. And then we're going to go to the learning, the learning environment. Other things that we're actually going to start on. We have our principals right now. Hello, principals. They've been texting me when there were some audio issues, but they're watching right now because beginning tomorrow, we're going to start our learning environment procedures. So we're going to start looking at the building environment layout, cafeteria floor plans. I mean, these are just examples. Classroom floor plans, arrival dismissal procedures, student exit maps, car and bus arrival and dismissal, campus protocols and procedures, restrooms, hand washing, movement in the building. So all of those will be thought out. And then lastly, which is something that has been ongoing and that is being perfected and that is keeping in mind what it would look like virtually, what it would look like in person, and then what it would look like if there is an approach that we have to provide both. That is something that we have been planning, and all of our team has been planning and training and aligning curriculum documents, creating professional learning so that we're providing for the next steps in education 2020. So that's all I have for now. And now we have Miss Nash, Jody Nash, the lead principal. Lead principal. You can be. No, the lead nurse, district nurse, and she's at the high school.
Okay, so I am a part of the healthcare and support subcommittee. And one of the first thing that we were, one of the things that we were going over was how we are going to make sure that everybody is safe that is actually going to be present on the campus and facility grounds. So health screenings, we have been doing daily logs right now, but we are looking at implementing QR codes, which you can see a picture of, and it's actually a live one. So if y'all want to see what it looks like, you can actually use your
You have
phones.
one in your little book if you want
Yes.
to click on it real quick.
It is on your in your folders as well. So we will be posting up.
You can do it.
Is that like a comment?
Good try, John.
If you want to go ahead
I can
and
do it
see
on
what
my
it looks
phone.
like, you can. Yes. So is what this is going to do is every day an employee is supposed to kind of do like a self-check at home prior to coming to the grounds, and then they can complete this. They need to complete it the same day. So they can't do it the night before because things can change so drastically just overnight. So before they step foot on the grounds, they need to complete this, whether it be at the door, because we're going to post these at all the entrances, or they could do it right before they leave to come to work, just as long as they're providing that information and doing that self-check at home. So this is going to send email results we're going to set up specific email addresses that, so it won't overflood the, sorry. I told you I speak low. Okay, so this is going to be a email address that will be accessible to the supervisors or whoever is designated, as well as the nurse, so that we can make sure that everybody is not symptomatic. If they are symptomatic, they're supposed to check with the nurse just to make sure, if they have any of these symptoms that are indicated on that screen, then they need to speak with a nurse prior to trying to go onto the campus facility, just so that we can make sure that it is not a possible COVID case and that they need to start isolating immediately. For the students, we were planning on having, since there are already people out front as students enter the building, having them remind them that, hey, make sure that you're feeling well today before you come in. So it's a good reminder right then. And then we were also talking about having an announcement first thing in the morning in their first period, and then possibly again as they do the morning announcements during third period. Yeah. So, and then obviously, I know this kind of steps on chiefs, but, limiting parent access or visitor access to essential personnel. And then the next portion was, we are, starting to implement the health protocols, and we will be doing staff trainings. So for the QR codes, we are going to be planning a training so that all the supervisors that are going to be responsible of looking at those results, they will know how to do it and what to do if they have anybody that is symptomatic. Okay. So the next one was the standard report. Do you want me to go over this in detail? No. Okay. So it's this something that we're creating. Obviously, first thing would be prevention, and then moving on. If there were a positive case, what would be done, and measures that would be taken to try to correct it and prevent further outbreaks. I think the rest is yours. No. They've proven that because the temperature checks would only be like a measure at that moment, and things can change like throughout the day. We also don't know if they're going to pre-medicate before they come to school, which could affect it. Maybe they have a muscle pain and they take ibuprofen, and it could affect their reading. So, and there are too many people that have been asymptomatic or not having temperatures until later on with the COVID.
So one of our partners was actually a healthcare worker in the healthcare field, and she gave us a protocol of what they're doing within, because she works with strictly COVID patients. And so she gave us a questionnaire that they ask people. That's just like one small signal of actually having COVID. So there would be, we discussed possibly asking the kids, are you experiencing any of these things? She said the temperature just wasn't it just wasn't effective. They were finding in the healthcare industry. So it's definitely something we could look at, but she was very, yeah.
Every hospital clinic you go to, check the temperature before you go to see them.
Right. So that's part of any type of vitals that they would take would be a temperature, but what they've been seeing typically is that the other symptoms are more pronounced before the fever even would be noticeable.
Yeah, we can share that. She sent us this really great just list of things that you need to be aware of that would be more indicative of having COVID. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So then the next part was additional nursing support personnel. We would like for you to consider adding 2 paraprofessional positions as nurse aides. Currently, we do not have a nurse aide on the Barnett Clinic or the Kubitschek Clinic. And our numbers have been increasing every year. Just in the 2017-2018 year, we went from 25,497 to the following year, 2018 to 2019, was 35,123. So that was almost 10,000 additional office visits in just that 1 year. This year, we were already at 27,727, and that's with months of, not seeing students. So with that trend, we were seeing at least an additional 9,000 more. So, and I know that information isn't in the slide. It got to her kind of late to get put in, but I figured I would at least provide y'all that information. So with doing this, it would help to support the clinics. We would be able to say that the nurse is responsible for this specific set of duties while the aide is assigned this specific set of duties. They would also be utilized as a backup if either the nurse or the aide happened to get COVID and had to quarantine. Then we would have at least that one person on campus that knows all the policy and procedures that they need to follow. If we needed to set aside an isolation room because we have so many students that are symptomatic at that time, we could do that. They could be utilized in many different capacities, and obviously with the the increase in trends and the uncertainty of what's going to happen with COVID-19, we would like for y'all to consider adding those two additional positions.
Okay, so I'm next. I'm going to be talking to y'all about social emotional learning. So you're probably like, what is that? But as educators, we are in the business of educating the whole student. And their social emotional learning is imperative, especially in times like these, and especially for our kiddos, because they've seen their fair share of trauma. So I'm sure y'all probably know this, but we have within the district implemented an SEL coordinator and PBIS coordinator. So basically what we're looking at with social emotional learning, there's 5 different competencies that you're looking at. So you're looking at self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. Sorry, let me flick this. There you go. Social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And of course, data will blow you out of the water telling you how much social emotional learning influences academics. It does. They go hand in hand. So going through this, one of the things of course, we have to reach all of our stakeholders. So we've looked at the different stakeholders we're going to be reaching: staff, students, and parents. For staff, we're looking at social emotional learning trainings. We have a committee and different curriculums that we're looking at to be able to implement those within PLCs, within different professional developments that we do on campus, because teachers have to learn. I mean, we're all learning. It's a work in progress. We all are with social emotional learning. So this would be advantageous for us to be able to teach the teachers different strategies and things they can use within the classroom to implement social emotional learning within the academic learning. And if y'all have questions, please ask me. I can go into greater detail. But trauma-informed training, as you all know, we have community partners with Texas Children's and Gulf Coast Center. There is the 6 principles of trauma-informed care, which we've already gotten with Gulf Coast on, and hope to push out to the parents via the website, and hopefully a Canvas website that we're going to have strictly for SEL implementations and curriculum for the kids to look at and parents to be able to go to. Counselor support training, we'll also be doing this through PLCs. One of the things that we were looking at is being able to go in and teach, like I was saying earlier, teach the teachers how to implement SEL within the classroom and different strategies they can use. We have our curriculum as well, which I'll talk about in a little bit, called the 7 Mindsets. There are targeted PowerPoints and different lessons that you can share with teachers that are there for teacher learning and things like that. And then strengthening and promoting a positive culture with the 7 Mindsets, and I'll tell you about this on the next slide. I'll kind of flip it so y'all can. Okay, so with the 7 Mindsets, last year the counseling department came together and did a district-wide implementation of the 7 Mindsets. So what we did is monthly, we tried to have an overall mindset. Everything is possible, passion first, we are connected. And we tried to do different spirit days, things like that, that would help the kids connect with these different mindsets. So the hope is to have that be a stronger thing within the district for teachers and students. So student training, one of the big trainings we're going to push, and we talked to our healthcare worker on our team, as well as Jody and I have talked about doing student trainings for COVID, because when the students come back in, we really need to ease them in. They're going to be struggling. I mean, we're all struggling. So we definitely need to be able to tell them the truth about COVID, what's true, what's not true, and then ask them how they're feeling about that, have those open discussions. Campus-based student committees, one of our fine students, Jay, thought about this, and she was really interested in starting an SEL committee on the campus, which would be great because it's all about the student. So if they're helping to drive that and they can come up with ideas, like I know at the high school, one of our biggest SEL drives is student council. I mean, they're phenomenal. So having more student input in that and having a separate committee would be great. So that's maybe something we can look at all the campuses. And then, of course, the 7 mindsets, as y'all see here, this is a whole curriculum that we have that we've invested in through the district, and we use that as SEL training with our students and teachers. And then for the parents and community, so again, we're hoping to have a Canvas page where parents can go and find different parenting tips, trainings to help support their kids because they need to be supported with social emotional learning at home as well. Also, newsletters, S'mores, the counseling department does S'mores monthly. And that's at every school. We've been doing it throughout this pandemic as well. And then trauma-informed care and support. Again, we would be able to share within the 6 principles of trauma-informed care, working with our partners within the community who will also help with that. Is there any questions?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. My subcommittee was extracurricular, co-curricular activities. And I did have Coach Bentley on my subcommittee, and I just throw that out there because obviously he's probably the one who's most up to date on all the UIL guidance that they've put out. So he certainly, the whole committee was great and very helpful, but he was able to provide us with the latest and greatest that UIL came out with pretty quickly for our committee to review. So the first thing that we came up with is that we'll need clear protocols for any athletic events, any sports athletic events that are going to happen, which again will probably mostly be driven by UIL. They did come out with summer guidelines. He was able to put in place a summer strength and conditioning program, but they, as far as I know at this point, they have not released any guidance for the fall yet. Fine arts activities, we'll need to have protocols for those as well. The committee discussion was basically that not all fine arts fall under UIL guidance. All of our activities, we put in place the UIL, no pass, no play rule, but they don't necessarily all fall under UIL. But in this situation, we would probably, make a consistent effort as much as possible for all of those activities that occur outside of the normal school day to follow those UIL guidelines. And like I said, to the extent possible, but have some consistency there. Any other activities in after school clubs? The elementary schools probably have the fewest amount of after school activities, but this year we did put the stream club in place, and that was something that happened in all of the elementary schools. They have their safety patrol kids that help with morning drop off and afternoon drop off. And then obviously as you go up through junior high and high school, the amount of after school activities just increases at each level. So I know at the high school, just from being there for the number of years that I was, that we had probably 3, 4, 5 pages of after school clubs and organizations that happened. So we'll definitely need protocols in place for any of those activities that may be occurring after normal school hours. And we also need to look at the Creative Explorers before care and after school care program that happens on the elementary school campuses. They're a little more daycare based and aligned, but we'll probably want to make sure that they're consistent with what's going on our campuses throughout the school day and in line with any other after school programs that are happening. We want clear guidelines for the following things: health screenings for students and staff, which I think would probably mimic what Ms. Nash was saying, and we'd follow the same guidelines or procedures that are put in place for during the school day as well. Facilities and equipment sanitization. So before, after, and during events, you've got to take into consideration any after school practices along with any competition or performances that are going to be occurring on campus. And again, I'm sure when Bob talks with his part, he will have incorporated that piece for any time, whether it's during the school day or outside of the school day. But those were things that we knew as a committee we need to make sure are in place. Indoor versus outdoor activities. There can be a big difference in, a lot more space outdoors than there is indoors. So we've got to take that into consideration when you're thinking of social distancing. Transportation to and from events, which again, will probably follow the same guidelines that we transport to and from school. But we'll need to make sure that we have guidelines in place for anytime we are going to a competition or a performance and coming home from. We need guidelines for booster clubs, meetings, fundraisers, concession stands, et cetera. Organizing practices to minimize exposure to different groups. This was something that UIL put out with their summer plan that I know that Coach Bentley and Mr. Kinzer worked on the fine arts plan for summer that they put in place, where you try to keep kids in the same group day after day so that they're not. So if somebody comes down with symptoms or happens to be confirmed COVID-19, that there was less exposure. Maybe you have to only isolate that group of kids or staff member that worked with that group of kids versus the entire team or the entire marching band or whatever. And then spectators, will need clear guidelines for spectators for home and away. And again, a lot of this is going to be driven not only by TEA, but by UIL guidelines. And then the last thing that this committee felt like was important was to consider calendars in other districts. And we bring that up because you're competing against other districts. So we need to see what their calendars are like and what it looks like for them if they're going back to face-to-face instruction, virtual instruction. If for some reason a facility had to be closed, whether it was one of our opponents or ourselves, how does that affect the competition? So, if we're not in school every day and we're not able to go to school every day, what does that look like for what we can do after school hours? And as far as budget constraints, I don't think that this committee thought that there would be a whole lot of budget constraints, and this might seem very minimal, but they did bring up the water piece. Coach Bentley said that it was very, concerning throughout his summer practices and stuff that he could not provide the kids water, and they would show up with a little 16-ounce bottle of water to work out in the heat. So that may be something that we have to look at as a district, is that if we're able to practice, are we going to need to find different way? Are we going to have to provide bottled water to these kids and a way to keep them hydrated and keep them safe, since we're not able to use the system that we've been using for years? So that was really kind of the only budget constraint that this group felt was worth, bringing up. And that's all I have.
Was the water thing a
UIL,
UIL recommendation?
no.
No requirement.
Requirement.
Mhm.
I do think there's ways that extends to the fall that we can work through that. But for the summer, it was a surprise difficulty that they weren't really expecting. I mean, they think bring your water would have been fine, but they didn't anticipate not enough water.
So
and
they're
how we can fill
yeah.
water and that kind of thing.
They're okay with kids working out with a heat index of 105 and will not allow the school to provide water.
It's not just providing water, it's the way that they were using I don't know the word. It's the
I think it was the
water
system in
trough
which
or
they
whatever it's
provided it
called.
over. They had all the Gatorade bottles and
water,
they were
I guess
out
is the
where
way.
anybody could walk up and pick them up. So I'm sure if we were providing, and this is just my
That's
guess,
not right.
I'm not saying UIL said this, but I'm sure if we provided every kid their own bottle of water that they kept it on their person and there was no chance of it getting mixed up where somebody else could drink out of it, we probably could have provided in that way. But in the system that we had in place, that we had been providing water, that was not allowed.
So I know at the refineries or the turnarounds, they have somebody standing there with gloves on, handing you your bottle of water.
Really?
Yeah. Sub coolers and coolers.
So I think it's just going to take us thinking through it differently and providing it in a different way than we have
Maybe
before.
filling up their water instead of allowing them in a group to get water, things
Right.
like that. So those just things that will have to be considered if that rule applies in the fall.
Okay, we're gonna move on to safety and operations and finance. We're gonna split this up between me and myself and Chief, if you wanna jump in and talk about your part, or we can cover it either way. Our group looked at everything from maintenance and operations and how do we maintain and keep the schools clean. We talked about, we've always had a flu cleaning protocol, so we'll start the school year off with that. That means we'll be cleaning desks every day. We'll wipe down common areas with disinfectants every day, like we would during a flu or outbreak or a bacterial outbreak in a campus. We also will distribute, because we need to attack this virus holistically. 7 custodians in an elementary can't keep up with 800 students in an elementary. So we have to attack it holistically from the student to the teacher to the custodians to everybody in the building. We're going to distribute some written disinfecting guidelines and protocols for all the teachers and staff. We plan on also providing disinfecting chemicals to all the teachers to keep in their classroom so they can wipe down desks, wipe down keyboards, wipe down things in their classroom as their day goes on, as kids move around. We'll also make sure we keep an abundant inventory. We try to keep 2 weeks worth of inventory on campuses at all times. We'll ensure that that is happening. And we also will make sure we have a month's worth of inventory in our warehouse in case we run into any kind of product delays due to a COVID outbreak or something like that. We'll also are looking at, we're going to put hand sanitizer in all the classrooms, hand sanitizer stations, whether those are ones mounted on the wall or little bottle pumps inside the classroom. We'll maintain those throughout the year. We'll also put those in cafeterias, libraries, hallways, areas like that, so that we can make sure we're offering good hand sanitizing opportunities outside of just general hand washing, which preferably they would be doing that, but hand sanitizer does help whenever they can't all go wash your hands in the sink. So with that, we'll move to
Chief.
No, it's Chief.
Chief. Oh, Chief, do you want to cover this?
Come on down.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
In our subcommittee,
They can't hear you on the Zoom.
safety, we were, making a few recommendations. One of them was minimizing the amount of visitors into the building and volunteers into the building. Also, recommending and encouraging the use of masks at times when people can't actually social distance, such as transitioning between classes on school buses, loading and unloading school buses, as well as passing through the metal detector station. And also, protocol that we're recommending for the metal detector stations is to consider prohibiting the use of backpacks at junior high and high school level until this COVID threat is over. Because the students and the security personnel and teachers that are searching bags in close proximity to each other and would avoid cross-contamination by searching one person's belongings, then move it to another person's belongings and touching multiple students' property.
Feedback on mask, anyone?
Yeah, I had a problem with that. What about camera systems? Identifying people, just if something happens, how do you identify someone? An issue. What is the concern of health or you can't clean up?
If there's any more discussion, Chief, I just wanted to let you text me and ask that you go online.
Okay.
James was trying to give you his. He has to scoot in. So feedback on masks, truthfully, obviously, I know one of the learning committee group talked about the discussion about having students wear masks only when they're working in groups that are close proximity potentially. And then the bus transportation group had discussions about that too. But obviously, require versus recommend is a discussion that you should probably think about if we're going to absolutely require that.
Also price. We're gonna have to supply them with the price.
Yeah. And that's a discussion that the whole budget piece is we have, Lee has presented at the end that you can kind of look at and see many of the impacts if we choose to do that. Just as a side note, TA did provide us some PPEs for our district, for every district. So we have, I guess, a starting point for mask and disinfecting gloves, some of those things.
Face
A
shields.
pretty good many. I want to say it's like 40,000 masks or some crazy number like that. But then I don't, it depends on how you require them and how you get them out. So if you're giving them out on a bus every day, then that's going to go pretty quickly.
Well, and that's kind of one of the things, I mean, it's hard enough to get my son to put on clean socks, much less clean mask. And I'm sure other parents are having the same problem, and I'm just as guilty. I work for a company that it requires me wear a mask inside of customer locations when I go in, and they sign my paycheck, so I follow their rules. Truth is, you're wearing the same mask every day. You don't have 100 of them. It's probably getting to the point where it's more unhealthy to wear it than it is not to wear it. And that's the concern I have, especially with kids. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's the truth. They don't put on clean socks.
Jody, did y'all's group talk about mask at all? I know if you're talking to healthcare providers, there's 3 things that they really are focusing on. Obviously, social distancing, and mask is definitely one of them, and then the screening piece, minus necessarily the temperature. But
Well,
did
and
y'all
I'm
talk
leaving
about
out
that?
I mean, I'm not even going to argue whether masks work or don't work. I'm simply looking at the fact that they're going to be filthy nasty and they're putting them on their face. They're kids. That's what's going to happen. It's guaranteed. There's no way around it.
Not only that, can someone kind of walk me through how it looks? You got kids wearing masks sometimes, but not other times.
Yeah.
You're not going to keep kids away from each other. So how does that, why, I mean, what's the purpose if you can't do it all the time?
I was reminded to please turn your mics on and speak closer to your mics. I'm sorry.
The lady that was on our committee that is a healthcare worker was very adamant about wearing masks. It is going to be very difficult to do in an educational setting. So that is something, I mean, it's one of those things we're going to have to look at. I mean, how do you distance those kids? Because we saw at graduation, they don't want to distance. So it's difficult, but I guess you have to look at the setup of classrooms. And I think somebody's talking about that or talked about that already, but how do you distance them within the classrooms? What's their travel look like in the hallway when they're coming in to the school? Do they put their mask on after they come through the metal detectors? I mean, so all those, there's little different things like that that are going to have to be looked at. But she was pretty adamant about wearing masks because she works in the COVID unit.
You can ask 10 different people who work in the medical industry, and they're going to tell you 10 different
Well,
things.
she was really adamant about it because she works in the COVID unit and she said that none of her employees have gotten COVID and they're working with COVID patients. And that's, she's a stickler about the mask. She thinks it's a preventative measure. And so,
My wife works in the COVID unit too.
okay.
Well, and I think that's, and getting into the argument whether they work or they don't work to help prevent, I think that's just an argument that we could have for 14 days. Back to the point, I don't see how we're going to make,
With kids.
are we going to have the ability and the authority as a school district, when a kid does not have his mask on, if that is something we say, that kid is going to the office and going to get sent to detention because of it, for not wearing it?
I think those are.
Do we have that authority?
I think they're definite, if we put it in our rules, we would, but I know that that's one of the pieces that is going to be part of the TEA in-school guidelines that we have not received yet.
Well,
But I do not expect, just to say, I do not expect them to require that.
because I thought I was reading something today that said we would not be allowed
Yeah. we
to
have-
discipline a child for not wearing a mask.
That we don't have yet.
And
That
if
is
we
not-
do not have the authority to discipline a child for not wearing a mask, we have no control, and we're not going to control it. That's the problem. And like I said, I'm not even arguing whether they work or they don't work. That's a whole nother argument. The thing is, if you can't force them to do it, how's it ever going to work? And you're not going to get them to wear clean, healthy, brand new mask every single day. They're going to shove it in their backpack. I have seen the inside of my son's backpack. It's scary.
But it's not even
don't
every
wanna-
day.
you don't
It's
wanna-
whenever you take it off because you're doing this and you put it in your pocket or your backpack. and then you mess with everything and then you go to get it again. It's just,
Well,
the
and-
ridiculous.
and
the
this is the other
ridiculousness
thing,
of that
it's
doesn't
not
make
just
sense.
kids, it's even adults, because like I said, I wear them at work because I'm required to, even though I don't agree with it, but that's a whole nother subject. I'm sitting there today as I go in and I come back out with my mask that I took off so I could answer a conversation, have a conversation on the phone in my truck, and I pull the mask back out and I stick it back on, the same mask.
Get a new one.
I put it on the opposite direction that I had it on the first time.
Oh, yeah. So what
I
about?
turned it around,
What's it look
so
like
any
as
germs
far
that
as
it
That's a good
caught.
teachers
thing
taking the
about-
time to focus on masks all day long? Because you're
I-
gonna be doing it.
That is definitely a factor. So I think, so technically, could we probably put it in our code of conduct and require it? Yes, but I think there'll be fights about that, and I do think that enforcement will be difficult. So that's something to consider. It's a balance. Do you, is it going to make that big of a difference, and can you monitor it? And I could see kids fighting over that with teachers, especially at the high school level.
Well, I think you're gonna have a problem also, because you can look at these survey results
Not
that
I
may
don't
have
think it's a
changed.
okay idea.
These survey results may have changed slightly since there's been a
Right.
increase lately. I give that, but these are overwhelming. People don't want them. This is not a majority. This is a super majority. This is 75% or so. That
would
is a
say-
huge number.
Do
I
they
would
not
say that
want
we
them
would
because
have to
it's a,
continue
it's
to
a pain?
encourage healthy practices, just as we do with the flu or anything else. Always encourage social distancing and encourage mask use if they would accept it. There's going to be those students that want to wear them and those that don't. So
And I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong. If somebody wants to do it, absolutely do it. I just don't see where we can force people to do it. I don't see in a world that's ever going to work when 70-something% of the community is against it. The kids are going to fight us tooth and nail, especially if TEA says you can't discipline them for not doing it. The only ones that we're going to be able to get to work with us are the ones that want to do it. And those, yes, we should encourage those. Yeah, if you want to, yeah, we highly encourage you to do it. But we're in a tough spot here. There's not a lot I think we can do about it.
So it means it's not required. Recommended, encouraged, but not required.
I think that's all we can do.
Educate on that note.
Oh, a
Yeah,
lot of education. Now, don't get me wrong. We want to educate them
That's good.
and try to push as much as we can, but
So we can enforce it in our workforce because you get paid. So what's the difference in school? I'm lost here. It's a rule. It's a new rule. It's called life. It's a world we live in now. If that's what we want to do, we live with it. If they need a new mask, we have a case of mask and we issue a new one. If it's dirty, so be it. It's going to be one of those what ifs.
But if we're being told by the state that we can't discipline them,
Well, then that's
Or you
who
can't
sets the
enforce it,
rule. But I'm
that's-
saying if the state says to do it, then we do it. I don't think it's our internal choice.
At
All I'm
this
saying
point,
is
the
if you
state
don't
hasn't
agree
said
with
we have
them,
to do it.
don't do it at work. It can't be a one cafeteria style. It's all or nothing, can't, it's when it's convenient, not convenient. We need to wear it as a whole, if that's what the rule is. My opinion.
I mean, I know it's no secret that everybody's, seeing the news and everything, but I think we can all agree that everybody says that it affects kids way differently. So if that's the case, then why are we going to require them to wear masks all day whenever they're not being affected by this?
The kids are getting it now.
They might be getting it, but the deaths are obsolete.
my personal
Just saying
opinion
you get-
is we're all going to get it because it's not going to go away. We have
Do
no
you have
choice.
vaccine?
I mean,
There's no flu
till the
shot.
vaccine comes in, and then they're going to do the herd immunity, and then it's all going to be a thing of the past to be on the
But
in the history
until,
books that we talk about.
up and until a vaccine comes, the reality
Sorry
is,
for you to jump in.
other than wearing your mask and staying away from everybody, you either shut down or you're going to end up with it. It's flu season. You're going to get it.
So, just for time, we're not gonna get this right 100% in either way.
No.
I mean, truly, there's gonna be people that are gonna love us and people are gonna hate us, which, so be it.
Whatever the rule gets to put in place, that's what we do.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
mean,
rule.
It is what it is. I mean,
want to wear it, they wear it.
And so we'll transition into transportation guidelines. So one of the first things that we feel like is extremely important, and I'm Lee Townsend, and I am filling in for Mark McKinney, who is on vacation somewhere in the mountains, probably not wearing a mask. But we need to survey the parents to find out what their thoughts are about what is the ridership. Currently, we're about 1,800 students who are registered for the 1920 school year. So we need to see how many are wanting to have their children ride the bus, how many want to provide the transportation themselves, and encourage, if they can transport their students, to do so. We are going to go through the survey process, and we're going to coordinate with Kim and her group. Then for those that we do not get a response from, we are going to contact them. We need to talk with every single household who has children riding the bus. We have several models, not just one, multiple models that were discussed in the committee. The one that fits the fleet that we have and to do the best that we can with the current ridership is to skip the middle seat and go on the seats and skip the middle seat with the window and aisles. That would get us about with the ridership that we have with needing 3 more buses. We do believe the ridership may change and we may have less riders, but we are not at this time with this model able to have the 6 feet distancing. You would need very few riders on a bus to get the 6 feet. I believe the numbers that we used when we looked at all the different models, we would need close to about 12, 13 students per bus if we were to go with the 6 feet. So, but what we have right now is the airplane seating model that we're looking at. Again, we would have to discuss if we can't do the 6 feet of each, would we require mask? Could we have the driver step out of the bus while the students enter? Can they enter in such a way that they never cross each other? Yes, all those things can be considered. The next thing is we are mounting dash hand sanitizer disposers. So when they enter the bus, they can clean their hands and have multiple times to have that happen. Cleaning the buses between routes. We have foggers, wipe downs. It will take about 15 extra minutes that we did not calculate into the distance and route times when we were looking at that in the spring, because it takes about 10 minutes for that mist to dry. So those are factors that we're going to have to look at. We will have to collaborate with the elementary campuses administrators to create a process for students boarding the buses so they could be in the correct order when they get off the bus so that they're not crossing each other, to try to maintain the 6 foot distance as possible. Also, it's been recommended drive with the windows down to get fresh air. Well, you know, August just isn't the most pleasant with the windows down, but you're getting plenty of fresh air. So those things will have to be looked at. Include transportation, the notification process. If there is an issue, work collaboratively with the high school to consider if there's a possibility. And again, this was down on the list of priorities, but maybe there's juniors and seniors who could take a first period off and help out transporting siblings to school. Maybe not, but we were definitely trying to think of all the different things that we could to make sure that we minimized the social distancing. Again, very far down on the list of priorities to revisit walk-up zones for the elementary schools. You have to balance safety with social distancing to see, do you really want to go in that route? And also the drivers wearing masks and how that will work. So that is the transportation. And then our next is child nutrition, and Bob will be filling in for Cherie this evening.
Yep. So, you know, our group talked about different opportunities for food service. Obviously, we got to feed the kids. You know, one of the things was limiting cash exchange between students and staff. And one of the models she looked at was possibly having a teacher collect the cash in the morning and then running it down in a big envelope for all the kids that they bring cash that day, so that they're not handing it to the cashier whenever they're doing their picking up their lunches and stuff, because money's dirty. Also encourage use of the app, to preload money onto that. That way you don't have to worry about the cash. She wants to put decals on the floor that are 6 feet that show the social distancing, using disposable serving items, such as throwaway trays, plastic forks, and things like that. They will shut down a share cart. So right now in junior high and I think in elementaries, they have share carts. If you don't drink your milk, you put it on the cart. Somebody wants another milk, they go grab it. And it's a no cost for the kids. So I'll shut those down because, we got to keep that distance. Stop using the PIN pads and just give the cashier your PIN number and they type it in and do their money that way. The other thought was we could look at doing a badge system and doing card readers, and we have some costs for those, so that then they just scan their badge as opposed to giving their PIN out or, verbally telling somebody a PIN. Students will not be allowed to self-serve items. So what they'll do is they'll make the trays for the kids, as opposed to the kids grabbing milk out of the container and a whole bunch of hands going in the milk dispenser. They'll hand an individual milk to the students. The safety protocols for the staff that they're looking at, cashiers with mask, face shields if needed. Cafe staff, all cafe staff will have masks on. The serving lines will be sanitized between each class, which are not right now. Clear barriers will be installed, so we'll put a plexiglass like you see at a restaurant or in a cashier station in a retail place. We'll put a plexiglass barrier between the cashier and the students. And then also create safety protocols with each campus in the event dining in the cafeteria is not possible. So one of the things we talked about was if we had to serve lunches in classrooms, how we do that. We probably don't have the staff to take the lunches to every classroom. So we would have the kids who were buying lunch come walk through the line and carry the food back. Obviously pre-K and K, that's a challenge. So we would have to come up with something for them to actually take food to them. And then we discussed, a la carte sales, which is part of her funding. That's how she makes some of her money back. Maybe taking that a la carte around to the different areas as those different classrooms are eating their lunch, if we have to go to that model. But there's challenges with that model as well, because now you've got teachers that are never going to break. So we've got some challenges to work through with this, but we feel like we have a good foundation to keep the kids safe and fed, which is important. So.
What's next? Yeah.
Well, that brings us to budget. And let me start out by saying there's just a lot of uncertainty and we're getting new things every day. And I want to go back to one of the things that Kim said in her presentation on the synchronous instruction. It says here, attendance funding generated when attendance is recorded daily at a local selected snapshot time. Now, before we went from days to minutes, there was a way that you could have a day wavered if there was certain conditions that were met, whether it was an emergency or like a safety emergency, or there were several of them, but one of them was not an act of God. And by that, I mean, let's just say we had a power outage or we had rolling blackouts in August and an area that was doing this program did not have power and they were not able to log on. What we don't know is, would they allow us to count the attendance? Or would they say, nope, they weren't on at that snapshot time. We're not going to allow that to happen. So what we're really trying to do with the budget is trying to find out how to maximize what we're doing with what we will get funding for and how to make sure we have enough cushion and enough conservative approach that we're not caught off guard. So that's really one of the things that we've tried to do over the last years is to make sure that we plan and we look at all possibilities. So we really don't know all the student devices that we will need. We are looking at several different options. We've already said that it will probably be between $600,000 to $1 million to accommodate some devices at home to go home with students. We're not really sure exactly what it would cost for the remote setup with the webcams and the devices that you need to have that virtual classroom setting. And we're just taking mere guesses at about $15,000 to $25,000. Internet services and hotspots. So there's some areas that do not have established cabling or cable lines already there existing. So we're going to have to go with hotspots. We've talked about additional substitute teachers as well as substitute bus drivers and substitute cafeteria workers. There's just a lot of unknown that we want to make sure that we're looking at and that we're watching and that we're recording separately. we need to train. If we're going to change our environment of instruction, we need to make sure that our staff is prepared with internal services to each other, working together with each other in the PLCs, as well as our subcontractors coming in. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for those scenarios. So just a lot of unknowns. What has happened in the past is we travel through time. TEA gets the information of here's what's happening out on the campuses. We really need to support that. Let's give them extra money for this. We sure wish they would tell us that at the start. That would be so great. But what happens is we move down the line and a year and a half later, we get the notice. So what we do in the business office is we make sure when these things happen that we're coding them so that we can find them, pull them out, and get reimbursements on them. So if it were to follow other things, hopefully they would see that we need a little bit of help here. We've got some little extra things happening. It is nice to see that when I'm listening to the way that they're funding is they are taking into consideration that we can move a child from a remote to an in-class pretty easily and keep that funding because we've always needed that. So I think that's a great thing that TEA is moving forward with. And if we can keep that ADA and we can maximize that ADA, I think we're going to see ourselves in a very good position to face some of these things. As far as our support, we've talked about 2 additional nurses aides at the elementary schools. And also we're going to have to look at additional monitoring if we're going to try to help with that social distance. Monitoring in the school bus. So we have talked for a number of years at Mark's plan to keep the bus drivers where they are focused on driving safely, returning kids to and from home without any kind of accidents, making sure that they are not taking any chances, making sure that we're bringing down our accident rates, making sure that we're delivering that precious cargo. Well, now we're asking them to do something else, not only drive, get the students in, do student management, but make sure they social distance. So it might be that we choose to say, well, let's see if we can't reallocate some personnel to help out with that cause. And we're really not sure what we're faced with. Will we need to monitor in the hallways? Will we need to monitor in the lunchrooms? So we have put money in there just in case, wondering, do those things need to happen? Now, the other numbers that you see here are what we listed in the slide. So we're going to need extra cleaning supplies. Do we know how much? Not really, but that's our first guess at the different scenarios. We know we're going to need more hand sanitizer stations. We've gotten quotes on that. Gloves, hand sanitizer, disinfectant. It needs to be everywhere. It's got to be everywhere we go. It's got to be there. It's just not an option not to. Complete survey of current bus riders. We have got to talk to every single rider. We have got to know what their plans are, and we have got to plan accordingly and make sure that we do it in the best way that we can. Defoggers for the buses. Cafe modifications. So Cherie has gotten quotes on putting the plexiglass up at each campus, getting the gloves, the masks, the disinfectant. So just looking at the initial things that we know of right now, it's about $165,000. But then if we really want to social distance and we want to put as much distance as we can, we pretty much need 3 buses right now. Well, we know it's a 6-month lead time on buses. We can't just whip out buses. So to find 3 is going to be tough, but we certainly will start looking if we feel like that we need that. We also have down below is the technology information that's cut off at the bottom. I apologize for that, that we're looking at, as well as the internet services, the remote setup. And I'm going to tell you the likelihood that we have thought of every single thing right this second is probably slim. So I'm sure there's other things that we're going to add to there, but we are looking and we're diligently trying to find and maximize our ADA, which will maximize our funding, which will maximize our services. So it's all gone together. But what we don't want to do is come to the end of the year with oops, we didn't have enough of this. We didn't have enough minutes, or we didn't have enough teachers, or we didn't have enough snapshot. So we're really checking those details and checking them twice to make sure that when we end next year, the budget is in a great place, academics is in a great place, and we're good to go.
So I'll take that one and get some, just really quickly. And I know that you guys were patience is appreciated because it's been a long one. So thank you to all of the work of all of the people here and the people who aren't here and the people who are listening online who contributed to a lot of discussion, research, and work and getting us to where we are right now. So obviously this is tonight's workshop. We will post all of this information on our website along with the other information that's there as we kind of progress through this. We have information tomorrow to go out before our break for the next week to try to get some information from parents and staff regarding preferences. So just very quickly, without taking too much more time, in order to prepare, we have to give parents a choice of keeping their kids at home and learning and or being in school. In order to do that, we need to know what their preference is. At the same time, we cannot require them to commit to this until 2 weeks prior to the start of school. However, for us to start planning for how many people, how many students want the virtual option versus the in-school option in regards to matching staff and transportation and food service and all of those other things, we need to sort of get an idea. At the same time, I know many of you have mentioned, and others as well, is that people are anxious to get information, and we're anxious to give them information as soon as we have it funneled down in a good place. So our hope is to funnel it down in a good place very, very soon and have that comprehensive plan to give parents and students and staff to say, here's the details of how this will look when you come to school. Here's what we'll do in terms of safety protocols. Here's what we'll do in terms of hallway traffic, bathroom, water, athletics, all of the things you just heard. So that's a comprehensive plan. That's a lot of work that you heard. They've done some work on, but not complete. Unfortunately, we still have some guidance from TEA on what we should or can or can't do for the in-school instruction. So we can't at this time give you that information down to, we've given you what we've kind of come up with. And as Kim said, principals and schools are out there working on logistical details of school and how that might look similar and different. But what we can do is give parents the information on, we're gonna offer virtual learning, and here's the rules for that. It's the synchronous and asynchronous. We won't use those words, but it is, you must have a certain amount of time and attendance to do it. It's not quite what we left with from March to May. That wasn't as restrictive. This is more restrictive, and it is required. We have to have those minutes, and we have to document that. So if you sign up to have your child at home learning, you're going to commit to knowing that that child's got to do face-to-face time on the computer with so many hours, so many days of the week, and every day of the week, by the way. It isn't, I can do my work Monday and Tuesday and take off the rest of the week. That's not allowed. The attendance rules will not allow that. So what we hope to do is say, parents, given some of those parameters, right now, what are you thinking? What would you lean towards for your children? Are you thinking you would like to put your children on the bus, knowing that we're going to have some protocols in place, but we're certainly not going to put only 9 kids on the bus? So what we want to do is kind of get preliminary information to come back the week after we're off and start putting plans in place around that. So for example, if we have 80% of our families who say, I'm sending my kid back to school, and I do expect you to do protocols and those kinds of things, then we know how to plan instruction for the virtual, at least going. The other piece that Kim kind of mentioned, and we didn't spend too much time on, is the hybrid piece. TEA does allow, as Lee said, for us to go 1 day in school, 1 day at home. That is not continuity-wise, instructionally-wise, the best scenario for kids. It is an option that we as a district can use and code for attendance and to use if we need to, but not a choice for parents. So parents are going to need to commit to, when we can get them to commit to, so August 1st, for example, commit to, I want my child to start the first 9 weeks at home, online, and or I want my child in school. And that will gauge for us what we need to do in terms of building schedules and those kinds of things. So TEA just released yesterday that you can't do it before 2 weeks, which is hard. That's pushing us. We're kind of pushing back on that right now. It's pushing us on scheduling and on kind of organizing that. But on the other hand, I understand the changing nature as it is. So that timeline certainly can be adjusted, but I think we're going to push really hard for the week when we come back to at least put together a comprehensive plan that outlines what school looks like when we come back to school and what school looks like if you're going to do it at home, and get that out there. We preliminarily set in place a meeting for this board. If we want to make adjustments to the calendar, we would do it at that date. officially and require some, if we were going to require a mask and we can do it legally, then we would know that by then, hopefully. Then we would do that. If we weren't, then we'll go forward with recommendations. So the 15th date is the date that we kind of had put aside to provide for you that plan that we can then go forward with a couple of the caveats. Are we going to add 10 minutes or not, for example? And then before school starts, we're going to have to do commitment times. Are you committing to the first 9 weeks at home or in school? And so that's sort of what the thinking is. We can put out, and so the letter that I have planned to go tomorrow with a survey gives a little bit of that information. It says, here's what virtual is, here's what we're doing, you know, in the turn. So it'll give a little bit of information, but it won't have all the details that we don't have. So that's sort of the thinking on that, knowing that as we go forward, and I do appreciate the work of this group, that this is a small but mighty group working, and knowing that they put a lot of thought and care and concern into doing what we need to do for kids to be in a great place when we start school. But we also know we have to anticipate that things are going to happen. Things are going to happen economy-wise. It might impact us financially, and we have to be planned to be flexible in that regard and respond. And then I think on a positive, very positive note, embrace opportunity and learn the lessons that we've learned as we go forward to be better, to be even better, and to know that our goal and our communication as a district is we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. These details are kind of painful to work through because they're so different and so new, and you just want to do it right. And like you said, Eric, I know that there's going to be people that don't like masks or do like masks and aren't going to be happy with it, but we do want to do the best that we can. And so that I can tell you within all of these conversations has undoubtedly been the common factor, is everybody's trying really hard to get it right. Knowing that this is brand new, we're flying as fast as we can, and we're going to continue to have to adjust. We learned some great lessons over the last couple of months that I think we'll be able to use. And finally, I will say we have to continue to be patient, graceful, thoughtful, and know that we're still here focused on the very same thing. So thank you all for your hard work, and to the board for your patience and listening to all of the work this evening, because I know it's kind of a long time to sit and listen. But I'll stop right there for any comments.
This has definitely been a monumental task. I mean, this whole thing from spring break to now, but you know, when you start thinking about restarting school, that we will, you know, we just start school again. That's not the case. This is a lot of work. I mean, that's a lot of work, and just seeing what you've got on paper here and what you've done in this really brief time, that's a tremendous amount of work. I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, as a board, we can definitely commit to coming back together fairly soon to do any things that we absolutely have to. If there's going to be an adjustment in the calendar and that type of thing, I think we can commit to that, to try to help that process to get that information to people as soon as possible.
I agree with Russ Emmett. We had some questions, but y'all did a great job as far as a lot of thought went into it. It was very, very recognizable. Thank y'all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and please don't think that our questioning of anything is that we disagree or don't appreciate everything that's been done. I think we're all kind of in a situation right now where none of us can see the forest for all the trees in our way. And we're just going to have to keep that in mind. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just going to happen so fast, which y'all have proven y'all are good at taking care of. But there's one thing that out of all the things that I've heard tonight, I do have one pretty big concern. It is almost guaranteed we are going to be doing a tremendous amount of virtual learning, whether we want to or not. Kids are going to get sick. The virus is not going to go away. Kids are going to get it. They're going to go home sick. They're going to be out for 2 weeks. And that's going to happen. There's no avoiding that. I know Ms. Townsend's probably losing sleep at night from all the question marks up there beside technology.
I have no idea how much it's going to cost either, but I work in technology and I can guarantee you one thing, it's going to be expensive. The other concern I have is, I'm glad I have a good relationship with our technology team, so they won't take this wrong. Because they've done an exceptional job with everything that they've done last year, tonight, every day. But we're talking about a tremendous amount of technology. I don't want to say our team can't handle that because they're exceptional people. But that's a workload that we need to look at. And there's some other things too. It was mentioned earlier, we have say a server outage. Okay, so we have a server outage. And we have to purchase $200,000, $300,000 server. How are they going to do that in a moment's notice when that requires our approval? And we can't have a meeting in 5 minutes to make that decision. We have to schedule that meeting. We have to think about that because the technology team is going to have, and I don't know how we can even do that, but they're going to have some type of flexibility where they can take care of things like that in a moment's notice. They can't wait for us to approve it. They can't wait 72 hours. We got kids sitting at home doing nothing. So that's the one thing tonight that really stuck out is there's a lot of unknowns surrounding technology, money-wise, what it's going to look like, how many people it's going to take, and that could be a big problem.
Thank you for those comments, because you're absolutely right. Technology is going to be a huge, impactful part of our plan. And so we do need to look at some guidelines. And I think Mr. Norman mentioned it a minute ago too, is the state does allow us to have emergency meetings, so we can definitely look into that. And our technology group, I know, and Kip, you can speak to this if you'd like, have worked really hard to prepare and plan so that they're adjusting before servers go down. I mean, that would be the hope. And that,
That's always the hope.
yeah. But so if we have to have the emergency piece, we will. But the whole concept of the expansion of technology is a good concern and something that we'll all, I think everybody across the country probably will have to work with. I did, just as an interesting note, sit in on a technology connectivity meeting, which is a state directed initiative to enhance and increase connectivity. And one of the things that many of the services, whether it be internet services and some of the things on Lee's budget list, whether it was hotspots or devices, they're looking at statewide support for that. I'm not just saying money, but being able to access some of those devices at better rates so that we can actually get more as we go. But it's going to be an ongoing, evolving
If they're
piece.
available.
That's another point. You're exactly right.
That's the next thing.
Great comments.
They're not going to be available.
Great comments and great concerns. So thank you. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to deviate, juggle the agenda around just a little bit. We have an action item to consider and approve the purchase of Dell teacher instructional laptops. Mr. Robbins, if you're out there and available, would you like to discuss that with us, please?
Yes, sir. First off, thanks for everything. And especially to Jonathan, speaking of giving some kudos to technology, setting this hybrid up the way we're doing it right now. Thank you very much to my entire team. But just to kind of deviate a little bit, there's a lot of things I bring to the board. And this is probably the most important piece that I've brought to you in 2 years, in my personal opinion. Giving tools to the teachers, especially in this time, is absolutely the most crucial piece that we could do. And this is, in my 2 years that I've been here, this is the first time that, besides that, when we opened Barnett, we did give teachers those devices. And gave them all that great technology on that campus, and they absolutely just absorbed it. And then, with the curriculum team, providing that training. So this agenda item is to, due to the age, increased performance requirements, and software demands, there is a need to refresh our teachers' instructional laptop devices district-wide. That's wonderful. We're recommending to purchase the Dell Latitude 3310 2-in-1 laptops for those teachers that did not participate in the 2019 lease purchase program with the district. The Dell Latitude 3310 2-in-1 laptop is the same device that we purchased for the Barnett teachers, and the cost to purchase 240 teacher instructional laptop devices will not exceed $198,026.40. This is because the relationship that we have formed with Dell and the amazing pricing that they gave us on this is just, it's $100 cheaper than what we paid before per device. And there's a lot to be said there. So as we continue to navigate through these times, I'm very proud and happy to be able to do this for our teachers and throughout the district.
Yep. Is there when you were talking with Dell, do they have any kind of backlogs or anything else, or do we believe we can get those?
Yeah, so obviously if this gets approved, I will be on the phone in about 5 minutes calling Alex to get me a PO ready for tomorrow. We were looking at about 2 weeks, about a week ago, and then that got pushed farther to more like 3 to 4 weeks. But we're asking for a ETA, and hopefully we can get these in the hands of the teachers before they come back to school. And that's our hope and prayer. And by the way, we've got a 5-year warranty on these devices as well. So that's a major piece to that cost.
I do want to make sure that you noticed on there that will be coming out of the fund balance, since we don't have a budget amendment to go with it. You'll see the budget amendment at the end of July. So that is not in the budget of the 2021 budget, but it will come from the fund balance. I just want to make sure that you are aware of that.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Lee.
Nope, let's get this done so he can go get that PO in. Mr. President, I make a motion, we approve the purchase of Dell Latitude 3310 2-in-1 laptops as teacher instructional devices not to exceed $198,026.40.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the purchase of these laptops. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. And it is unanimous.
Kip, start dialing.
Start dialing.
Thank you. Hey, I really do appreciate that, guys. The teachers do too.
Well, Kip, we appreciate your vision and your heartfelt plan for the district and technology and things that you're doing with your team. So thank you so much to you, and as well, if you can let your team know that we appreciate it as well.
Oh, they
Saddle up, it's fixing to get interesting.
we're gonna be ready, James. We'll be in a good place. Thank you.
I'm sure you will. Okay, at this time, I'm going to take the board into executive session. We'll now adjourn to executive session as authorized by the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Section 551.001 concerning any and all purposes permitted by that act. Should any final action, final decision, or final vote be required, that final action, final decision, and final vote shall take place back in open session. And we are going into a brief executive session at, what is it, 7:47 p.m.
So Jonathan,
Okay, I'm bringing us back into our special meeting from executive session. It is now, what time is it? 8:26 PM. Do we have any action from our executive session?
Get it turned on. Yes, sir. I move that we employ Shannon Davidson as assistant principal for 220 days and Florence Atkins as principal for 226 days for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the assistant principal and the principal positions that were brought to us tonight. Any questions about that? Not all those in favor, would you raise your hands, please? And it has passed unanimously. Congratulations to Ms. Davidson and Ms. Atkins. Do we have any other action items from executive session?
No, sir.
Okay. That, any other comments or anything tonight from anybody? A lot of hard work, a lot of things, a lot still to do, monumental tasks. Appreciate everything from everybody. Lee, you got anything else you need to add?
I do not appreciate it. Thank you, y'all.
Okay. All right, well then I believe I will entertain a motion to adjourn since we took action items. All right. Anybody opposed to that? Good night.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good work.